Hello and welcome to another video, and annoyingly I filmed a version of this video before I'd done the live stream last night, finished the live stream, sat down to edit the new video, and it had no sound on it at all. So I'd filmed for about an hour and 40 minutes, sat down to edit it, no audio at all. Turned out that the cable on my microphone hadn't clicked in properly. There's no sound at all, completely muted, which gives me lack of confidence that you're hearing me now. But anyway, thank you for joining the live stream last night. Really enjoyed talking to everyone, and I think it was about an hour and a half, wasn't it? Something like that went on. But yeah, it's really good. Loved it. But on the back of some of your comments in my other videos, I do want to put out in this one that it does involve a dog getting ill, but it's okay. Yeah, it's going to pull through. We're there with you. But no, seriously, I understand people get upset when there's animals involved, and birds get hurt in this one, but they're wild birds and it's not nothing. Think of them as evil birds, and then they'll be okay. Yeah, but I understand it. There's films that I can't watch, like Fluke, when a dog gets hurt, and if I'm watching a film and I think a pet's going to get hurt, it puts me off of that film. But yes, there's a dog in this, but it gets ill, but it gets better, and so everyone is happy. Right. This one today is a bit of a strange one. So this comes from a lot of old pieces of bits in books and everything that I've had to go through researching little bits, because it comes from Framlingham, near where the castle on the hill is, where Ed Sheeran lives. So in his song Castle on the Hill, it is based around there. But to be truthful, the location isn't important. It's the people and the items in it that make the case, and it is a very, very strange one. It does come from reports in local country magazines, also from local newspapers and reports that Peter Underwood done on little bits of it, and other people from the Ghost Club. So it's got a lot of weird pieces. It's a bit of a jigsaw to put together, that's what I'm trying to say. But again, if you like my videos, subscribe, don't forget to put the notifications on, give it a like, give it a hype, and let's get into the video. Okay, so where are we? We are in Framlingham in Suffolk. And if I'm saying it wrong, I know I'm probably saying it wrong, but you know, what can you do when you talk like me? And I have been there, and not for this video. I went there with my family probably about 8 years ago. And to be truthful, it's actually where I found out I get vertigo. I was up on the top of the castle on the little walkway, and you got a sheer drop that way, and my legs were going all wobbly and everything. It's when I found out I also suffer from anxiety, so it wasn't a good day for me. But we're walking along, you've got all these reenactors down below, and my vision was going. It was absolutely terrifying, but it is a lovely castle. I say it's the Castle on the Hill from Ed Sheeran's song, and if you look over, you've got the old school on the other side where he used to sit and look over, and that is where the song Castle on the Hill come from. And yes, I used to love driving through the lanes listening to that song, and but yeah, it's one of my favourite songs, Castle on the Hill, really good. Reminds me of myself growing up, to be truthful. But the village itself is lovely, but we are looking at an area in this town. From the reports, we've worked out that it's either in Castle Street or 4th Street. This is just a normal family house. And in 1979, we have June Phillips and Steve Phillips, and their son, who is 15, and their daughter, who is 12, actually get this house as an inheritance. Now, unlike in today's world, if you inherited a house back then, you more likely could keep it without costing you the earth. This had come from either his great aunt or his nan. There is a little bit of confusion who it was that left them the house. Not that they were confused by it, just that the reports seemed to swap and change between who it was, the great aunt or their nan. But it does seem that that person was a bit of a character. As we'll get into this story, you got to start questioning her morals a little bit. But yeah, but they loved this house. They moved in, and it had been a big change for them. They'd actually lived in Ipswich, and in not the best area of Ipswich, So this moving to here in 1979 was a new lease of life for them. What I'm going to say, we're starting this story at the end, and you'll find out the beginning at the end, if you know what I mean. It does a bit of a circle turn on this, so you'll find out the reasons for all this at the end, and then we start at the beginning again, if you know what I mean. I don't. So, but in 1979 they've moved into the house, and it is old. It needs to be modernised. It hasn't been touched since like the 1940s. Their great aunt or their nan just lived a very simple life in there. A lot of items have been boxed up and put into the shed, and they were trying to live around the renovations that they were doing. One of these bits was a extended shed on the back of the house. When I went in there, their whole room was full of all these old boxes the nan or the great aunt had stacked up and just put away as memories and left alone. They didn't really think much about this and said, you know what, we've got enough to contend with decorating the house, making that livable, that we'll save this for next year. 1980 comes along, and they've had a lovely time with decorating the house and making it more modern. They've put the wood chip on the walls, and you've got to remember, back in the 80s, wood chip on the walls was actually a modern way of decorating. My bedroom used to have wood chip on the wall, and I used to sit there picking it all off. Who else done that? If you had wood chip wallpaper, you sit there picking all the bits off, and I just end up with all these like little dots all down the side of my bed where I sit there and pick all the wood chip off. But in 1980, the family had set their sight on redecorating and making use of the extended building, the shed. Now, it was a stone building. Their house sat just back off of the road and had a small garden. It wasn't a massive garden, but there was a big hedge down at the bottom and a brick shed that joined onto the house. They know that in there is a complete mess. It is roof high with all these boxes. During the summer period, they set aside a few weekends where they're going to go into that shed and drag stuff out and go through it. What they find is that their great aunt or their nan may not have been the most honest person in the world. They open up these boxes and they start finding doilies and cutlery and items from a place called Spexhall Manor in Halsworth, which is just up the road. I think it's about a 20-25 minute drive up the road. And it turned out that either their nan or their great aunt used to be a maid up in that hall, and obviously things were walking out of there with her, and she had got a nice collection of candlesticks, cups, saucers and knives, forks, salt and pepper pots, all this sort of stuff that all link back to this hall. It does remind me of Del Boy's mum in Only Fools and Horses when he says about the painting that she was working in a manor house and she took the painting out of it. But that's sort of the image I get of their great nan or of their nan or their great aunt. I just think it is quite amusing and a good family tale. Then they find something that is a little bit gross. They come across a little box, and it's about 6x4 size, and it's made of brass and very ornate, but around it is human teeth, or they think it looks like human teeth. They're not sure if they're real. They give a really good description of these teeth all set around the edge of this little box, but when you open it up, it's a sewing kit. I've already done the image for this, and I put in the description of this box into AI, and I was actually quite impressed that AI come up with this item that I was already picturing when I was reading the description of the box, and when AI produced it, I was like, oh, that's really good actually. So I'm going to use the AI image in this, but it's this really gross sewing box with all human teeth around it. Now, apparently it wasn't that uncommon for things like this to turn up. It does seem that years ago people would collect the teeth of their family. So as children would lose their teeth, or as adults had their teeth removed, they would collect the teeth and sometimes decorate ornaments with it. Sounds gross, doesn't it? But also inside this, they found a thimble. Do you remember the thimbles when you're sewing and you put the thimble on? Now, it's quite a large thimble, and it was a bit weird. It looked like it had been made out of like china or bone. It wasn't metal at all. It was like carved, and it was very ornate, but it also looked like it had been burnt, so it was all black. But I'm actually quite taken by this and thought it was actually quite special, where I would have just put it away and never wanted to see it again in my life. They thought, actually, you know what? We could actually have this in our house as a bit of a talking point. The only problem was it was a little bit oily, and Stephen gave it a little bit of a wipe, but he was like, no, better off, we'll just leave it in the shed and I will get round to clean it, but not now. So, and they left it in there and they carried on cleaning out the rest of that shed, coming across more items from the manor house, and they were thinking about, do we take them back up there or do we sell them? And I don't know the answer to that, but my suspicion is they probably sold them, especially if they were like nice silver items. Probably get better money for that. But the rest of the summer goes through and we're coming up to the Christmas period of 1980. Their daughter comes home from school and says that she's doing a school play and she's got to dress up as an angel. The school have given her an outfit and they've told the mum that she can adjust the dress to fit their daughter, which is great, fantastic. June is sitting there thinking, okay, well, it's a little bit long on her, it swamps her, so I'm going to take the dress up. June doesn't have a sewing kit. She's sitting there of the evening thinking, well, I'm going to have to go out and get a sewing kit tomorrow. Steve turns around and says, well, we've got the one in the shed that has got all the thread and needles in there that you need. And she's like, brilliant. They go in and they get the little teeth box, bring it in, and June opens it up and thinks, actually, I'm going to use the thimble. They say it's a little bit big for June's finger, but she's using it and she sits there for the rest of the evening with the thimble on, sewing away, and the dress is done by the morning when her daughter can take it back to the school. Bizarrely, something weird happens that night. June is asleep and she's having this dream. In this dream, she's being chased by a tall figure with a tall hat on and a leather apron, and he's trying to cut her finger off. Now, this finger is the finger that she had the thimble on. And all the time in her dream, her finger is throbbing, and this gentleman is getting closer and closer to her to cut her finger off. Fortunately, she wakes up before the gentleman actually does cut the finger off in the dream, but when she does wake up, her finger is throbbing. She touches it and it is burning hot. She goes into the bathroom and it is bright red and swollen. She wakes Steve up. Steve comes in and they look at it and they say, yeah, you've had a reaction to something, and maybe that there was something in that thimble that we hadn't cleaned it properly, and it's caused a reaction on your finger. Sensible thinking. So they clean it off and all that. Not thinking much more about the dream and all that. It's just a coincidence that had happened. On Boxing Day, the Phillips have friends come over for some food. They're looking forward to it, and Steve says, I'm going to put a talking point out. And she goes, what do you mean? I'm going to go and get that tooth box and put it on the sideboard and see how long it takes them to notice it and that it's made of teeth. Their friend is a dentist, so they thought it was quite comical. So Steve goes in, gets one of the doilies that the nana aunt has nicked from the manor, puts it onto the table, and he notices again it is very oily. So he gets some tissue and he wipes it off and he puts it onto the doily and puts it on the sideboard. When their friends get out, it is not long before the dentist noticed that this box is made of teeth. And Stephen and June were a little bit convinced that this wasn't really real teeth to start with, and that they were like plastic teeth stuck onto the box, which made them, it looked gross, but they weren't really like, really bad over it. The dentist gets up and he's looking at it, he's going, you do know this is real teeth, and some of them have been pulled out and not just fallen out. And they're like, oh, that makes it even more gross, and slightly put off by it. But they're talking about it and they open up the box and they look at the thimble. And the dentist is looking at it going, this is bone. I'm sure this is bone. And they get the needle and they start tapping this thimble. And it has a little bit of a ring to it. Not a china ring, but a different sound. And the dentist is going, I'm sure this is like bone, animal bone that has been carved into a thimble shape, which actually makes the whole thing a little bit more grosser. But they put it back and they carry on the evening, and they are playing Monopoly. You know, the great 80s game that was earlier in the 80s, isn't it? But I remember in the 80s, everyone played Monopoly around Christmas. They were sitting there playing Monopoly, when all of a sudden, the box on the side starts smouldering, and the doily underneath it actually catches fire. Stephen runs up with some water and puts it out, and they are standing there in shock. Steve comes up with a plausible explanation for this, well, in my view anyway, and it seems to be just roughly mentioned in the reports, but I think Steve hit the nail on the head here. In the reports, it states that Steve says that the box smells like linseed oil, and he blames that for the box catching fire. Now, I know from doing all my wooden tables that I make and my wooden plaques that I make, there's one shoved behind there that says haunted, that linseed, if you put it onto cloth or tissue and you screw it up, it does build up a temperature inside and can catch fire. And I've seen tests where they do this with rags, they put them in bins, and eventually they do just burst into flames. So that is why you have to make sure that you either dry your rags out flat out, or that you have to wash them and dispose of them properly, otherwise they can burn your workshop down. I think that is a plausible explanation. I think this box was coated in linseed oil to keep the teeth and the brass from deteriorating and all that sort of stuff, and that it dripped onto that doily and then burst into flames. The only problem I have, I don't know how much linseed oil would degrade to allow that to happen, and also why hasn't that happened before when it was in the shed for 40 years, why it didn't explode then, why it didn't catch fire then. The other possibility is that when they first went into that shed and they were cleaning things up, did they knock over any linseed oil that landed onto that box, and that is where all the oil come from. But I think Steve hit the nail on the head that that was the cause of this fire. I don't know how the linseed oil got there. Different opinions upon that. Then we get to February 1981. I keep looking down. I've got a long list of events down here. Even though I made this video last night and they are pretty fresh in my head, I'm still reminding myself of this because it's quite a complicated list. February 1981. June is in the kitchen and she's just doing the washing up. She's just mindlessly looking out the window while she's washing up, not really looking at what she's doing, when she sees a figure of this man standing at the bottom of the garden, and she goes completely ice cold because this figure of this man matches the description that she had of the man chasing her in a dream that was trying to cut her finger off. And although it was a really sunny winter's day, the man seems to be standing in shadow. She couldn't see the features on his face, and that he was wearing this overcoat with a brown butcher's apron underneath and this big tall floppy hat. She's looking at this gentleman, and then it really dawns on her that he's actually in her garden and he is this side of that hedge. So nervously she goes out into the garden. She goes through the kitchen, goes through the back door, walks out to the garden, and the gentleman isn't there. So she's quite puzzled by this, and she does tell her husband, and the husband's like, I don't know. He goes off and he talks to the neighbours. The neighbours say that it could be the local window cleaner going around checking for extra clients, and that sometimes he does come along the back windows to see if the windows are dirty, and if they're dirty he'll knock and say, can I clean your windows? June don't really buy this. She just thinks it's rather strange, and why would a window cleaner look at her and then just walk off without asking if he can clean the windows? So she's a little bit suspicious about it. But the next few days go past and nothing really happens, and they start to forget about this had ever happened. On the last weekend of April, Steve is out in the extended building and he's still tied up a little bit, so he wants to turn it into a workshop. He makes racing bikes, the old rally racing bikes. He sort of buys them all broken and he repairs them, and that is where he went to turn that into a little workshop to do that. He's in his workshop, he walks out the door into the garden, and standing exactly where the wife said, just the other side of the hedge, is this gentleman, again all in shadow, and Steve says that even though he was only about 30 foot away from him, he couldn't describe the face, but he does describe the same clothes as what June had described to him the first time she see him. Steve is about to shout out to this man, asking what he was doing in the garden, when a crow flies straight past Steve's face, almost hits him and hits the window of the house. When Steve looks back, the gentleman has gone. The crow is laying, unfortunately passed away, on the floor. He is quite shocked by this, but things like that do happen in the countryside. Over the next week, something really strange starts to happen in that garden. They'd be sitting in their house and they'd hear a thud on their back door. When they went to the back door and they opened it, they found dead crows stuck to their door. Steve says, and if I keep saying Steve or Stephen, in my mind they are the same person. My mates are called Steve and Stephen, and they're interchangeable. So one day he's Stephen to me, next day he's Steve, next time he's something else that I call him. But yeah, it's I do slip up and say Stephen and Steve, but yeah, it's all the same person. But Steve says that the birds are not nailed to the door, and they're not stuck to the door with glue. They just seem to be stuck to the door, and as if they've hit with so much force that they've sort of like almost embedded themselves into their door. And it's a big wooden door, but it is just very bizarre. In May, they're out in their garden and planting some plants around the borders when two big crows come flying down the path, just missing June and hitting straight into that back door. And again, they can't think of the reason for this. Steve walks out the garden and looks at the house to see if there's anything there that the birds could be misinterpreting as water, or there's a light reflection and making them thinking that there's a passageway through their door. But there's nothing there. In fact, the door is dark and there's no reason for the birds not to work out that that is a door. And yeah, it's almost like they're ending their own lives and flying straight into it. This is like quite disturbing to them. On top of that, June is really upset because Steve had only recently told her that he had seen this gentleman in the garden himself. Adding that to her dream and what she seen in the garden, she was like rather, well, the word that Steve uses, her brain was frazzled by this. And yeah, I can get that. But that evening, they are sitting in their living room and they're watching TV, and June wants a cup of tea. Steve gets up to go and make the cup of tea. He opens up the cupboard and he pulls out June's favourite cup. As he does so, it rattles. He looks in it, and the black thimble that had been in that sewing kit is inside her cup. He thinks the kids are having a little bit of a laugh with her and trying to scare her after knowing all what's gone on. Now, they don't give the names of their kids, but you've got a son who's like 16 now, the daughter that is 13. And I guess they are light-hearted and play jokes around that family quite a lot, because Steve assumes that it is just them playing jokes on them. He goes up and goes like, don't do this to mum because it's really getting to her and this is going to upset her. But like, we've done nothing. What do you mean? He says, you put the thimble in the cupboard. No, we didn't do that. Because we don't know where the box is. We've got no idea. Since it caught fire, you took it out and we've not seen it. Steve is like, well, they're correct. He took that box out and he put it back in the shed, just by the door that goes into the kitchen, but he put it there. He goes out there and it is under two other boxes that he put there. He opens it up and of course the thimble isn't there. And he starts thinking and questioning himself, on that night that it caught fire, did he take the thimble out and did it end up around the house and all, everything. He was just racking his brain trying to come up with an explanation for it, and he couldn't. He didn't tell June about this. He puts that thimble back into that box and leaves it in the shed, thinking no more about it, and at the back of his mind thinking it still could be the kids doing this. He makes the tea and gives it to June. They sit down and watch the rest of the TV. That night, something else happens in that house that is rather scary and dangerous. Steve is struggling to sleep, and he's laying there. June is sound asleep next to him, and he starts smelling smoke, and a putrid smoke. He gets up, he opens up the bedroom door, he walks along the landing, and he looks down the stairs. On those stairs, on their carpet, there is tiny dots of fire all the way down the stairs. Now this carpet is like the 1980s type carpet where the foam was very flammable and would give off really black smoke. Lucky enough, this fire wasn't spreading, but it was burning through the carpet and sending up this thick black smoke. And that is what Steve could smell, and actually that smell probably saved them from the house burning down. Steve just ran into the bathroom, got some water and poured it over it, and it was done. But he was really puzzled what could have caused this fire. He said it was this someone had dropped oil down those stairs and then lit it. The first suspect was their son. Now, I don't know the whole history about it, but I'm guessing that the son may have set some bushes alight locally. It does seem that Steve rushed to him to blame him directly, and I know that when I was growing up in the 80s, unfortunately some of my friends did like go around setting bushes alight, and it still happens today. But Steve did suspect his son of doing it. He went in there and he's questioning his son, he's shouting at the son, and the son was asleep when he walked into that room. Well, he believed that the son was asleep when he walked into that room and woke him up. And the son is like, honestly, I had nothing to do with it, I had nothing to do with it. So then he goes and questions the daughter. And again, the daughter was sound asleep and didn't know nothing about it. He's scratching his head, he can't work out what has gone on. But he does have to replace the carpet on the stairs. Okay, dog warning now. Okay, so this is where the dog comes into it. In July 1981, they get a golden Labrador puppy. The cutest puppy there are in the world. I don't care what people say. The Andrex puppies are just adorable. And yeah, I had Labradors and cross Labradors when I was growing up. I just love Labrador puppies. So I'm glad this isn't a sad story about a Labrador puppy. They love this puppy, but it can't go out in the streets yet. They're being responsible and they're keeping it in their garden and they're out there playing with it. They've had it a couple of weeks, so it's getting a little bit bigger. It's running around. It goes around the back of the stone shed and it comes out, and as it's running across the grass, right where they see that figure, the dog stops, and it stops dead, and it sits down and starts growling. Then the dog does something that is really bizarre. The dog collapses. June and Steve run up. The kids are crying. They get to the puppy and it's struggling to breathe. When they're looking at the puppy, they can see black around its lips, and they're worried that it's got something that is poisonous that has caused it. They take it off to the vet. Now the vet is really good, and the vet gets the dog back up and healthy pretty soon. But what the vet says to the Phillips is really, really strange. He said the puppy was suffering from breathing in smoke, and thick black smoke. And they go, it was nowhere near anything. There's nothing around there that was thick black smoke. They said, well, even like inside its nose, it was thick black soot, and the back of its throat was all black soot, as if it's been breathing, and it's gone into its lungs, and that is what had caused it to collapse. It was literally suffering from smoke inhalation. They go, that's just not possible. Stephen's gone back home, he's looking all around the back of the shed. What he is thinking is that maybe there's some coal dust around the back of the shed that the dog has got into and that had caused this to happen. He can't find nothing at all. There's dirt. They did find some little holes that the dog had been digging, but there's nothing there to say that there's coal or anything like that around that house. So they're very puzzled by this, but the dog does make a full recovery. But bizarrely, that puppy would always go to that spot in the garden, sit there and growl at the bush. Now, trying to put a rational thing on it, June turned around and said that people do walk up and down the back of that bush, and it is the point at the corner where people turn, and sometimes they do make noises as they're walking along and talking, and that could be what's attracting the puppy to that corner. We come up to November. The kids are out in the garden and they've got some sparklers. If you remember, fireworks back in the early 80s were rather dangerous. They were really dangerous back in the 80s. I do remember a lot of people getting hurt by them, and they were the main little bottle rockets and all that sort of stuff. They're out in the garden and they're waiting for their dad to come out and let some fireworks off in the garden. Their son had brought some friends over and they was just out there, got a little bonfire with a guy on it, just gonna have some fun. The kids are there and they're waiting for Steve to come out to light the bonfire and to do the fireworks. The son is standing there with his friends. They're looking down the garden and one of the friends turns around and says, "Who's that?" And they look, and three of those people standing there see this figure standing down the bottom of the garden on this side of the hedge, and they describe again this gentleman that has been seen many times now in that garden. But just as quick as they see him, he disappears. But because it's dark, they just think he's gone back into the bush. One of the kids there is shouting out, "Hey, we've got a peeping Tom and a knicker thief." Now, there was a thing years ago where people used to run around nicking underwear off of washing lines. So when I read that, it did remind me, I've mentioned this before in a video somewhere along the line, and it was just quite ironic that this come back up in this report. And it takes me back to, because it happened around our way, somewhere along, and nicked all the women's underwear down our street. Really bizarre, but yeah, it did happen. And as I say, so like, years ago, you weren't so protective about your back gardens, were you? So where I lived, like the gardens, you could see from the top of the road right the way down, and there's only like little wire fencing, so you could see your neighbours down the bottom and shout down to them and talk to them over it all. Where now we're all like private, we lock all our gardens off, so they're like your little castle and like little prisons that. And let's face it, some gardens today that are modern houses are little postage stamp gardens, aren't they? With these fences all around them. But yeah, it's weird that we've gone like that. Privacy is so important in today's world, yet we spend all our time on social media posting out what we've had for dinner. Strange world, isn't it? But anyway, while this is going on out in the garden, June doesn't like fireworks, she doesn't like bangs, she doesn't like anything like that, and she doesn't like fire, which is quite ironic being what's happened in the house. June is sitting there and she's watching the TV and she's got the dog on her lap. The dog jumps down, walks around the living room and then starts having a mad half hour. He's got something in his mouth and he's just spinning around the room. He jumps up again onto June's lap and drops the black thimble on her lap. This makes June go completely cold. There's no way that thimble has made it out of that box again. She gets up, she goes out to Steve and says, "Steve, look what the dog's just brought in." Steve's like looking at it in shock. He's going, "How has he done that?" He's gone into the shed. That sewing box made of teeth is still in the box that Steve put it in under all those other boxes. He removes it, opens up the box, and the thimble isn't there. And June is standing there going, "Somebody is trying to give me a nervous breakdown." At the same time, the son comes up and goes, "You know what? Blah, blah, blah. We've just seen this bloke at the bottom of the garden that describes what you said, Mum." That's it for June. She is like on the edge now and she feels like she can't take no more of it. Steve is almost there with her. He decides that, maybe someone around the area is having a joke with them and that he's breaking into their garden and doing all this. The next day, Steve goes to the police and makes a report. And the report is that he suspects that somebody is coming into the house, coming into their back garden, that is tormenting them and making their life a misery. The police can't really do much about it. The police do go around the house, look round, and there's nothing obvious to say that someone's getting into the house or anything like that. But they say that they'll get their Bobby to walk up and down the road for night time to check and see if anything weird is going on. That's all the police can do. There's no evidence there for them to take any other action. Luckily enough, nothing happened for the next few months, and we're moving into the middle of 1982. Now, this is where technology starts to come in, and they get a video recorder, one of the first video recorders, and they are the envy of the street. and they've got one off license that's just opened up that now rents out videos and very limited stuff, but all the kids are loving it. They're going down there renting out Mary Poppins and all this sort of stuff. So yeah, I remember that time. I remember getting the first video recorder. Our first one was a Betamax, and it's still the best quality one out there. Betamax, they've only just stopped making Betamax film. Yeah, VHS was poor quality. Betamax was the best. Like Android and Apple, yeah, Android's better than Apple. So that's going to upset some people who've got the Apple phones, isn't it? But Android's much better. But anyway, getting away from that, as you remember, with the video recorder, you could set it to record TV programs. And they were addicted to Coronation Street. One evening, they are going out, and June is like, oh, this is wonderful. I can record Coronation Street. Now, the tapes were only like an hour long. You have to be careful with what you recorded so you didn't cut half the program off. They set it up, press record, and they leave the house. They come back in the evening, and June sits down to watch her program. She presses play, and it's just like snowy interference on there. And she's going, oh, what have I done? Have we not programmed it correctly or something like that? And something's obviously gone wrong. They're sitting there, and they're fast forwarding through the tape, when June gives out a bit of a scream. She's playing a section of that video that is just interference, and she says that in that snowy picture on the screen, she can see the man that she's seen in her dream and see at the bottom of the garden. But Steve can't see anything. She pauses the video and he's pointing on the screen and outlining this man on the screen. Steve still can't see it. She is in a right state and she's going, can't you see him? Can't you see him? He is there. And she presses play and she says that he's through the next 5 minutes of that video just standing in the centre of that screen. Steve cannot see. He cannot see this at all. And he's starting to worry that things are getting way out of line for June. The next morning, Steve gets up, he goes down early, and he's going to go through the video recorder to make sure it's programmed correctly, that everything is tuned up, that the error that happened the night before doesn't happen again. Now, if you remember, you could buy these cases for your own tapes. They look like fake books, but they're like proper little cases. He opens up one of those cases, and inside that video case is the black thimble. There's no way that black thimble could have got inside that video case. Again, his thoughts turned to the kids. Now, after that had happened before, he didn't put that thimble back in those boxes. He actually took that sewing kit and put it at the bottom of the cupboard in the kitchen, making sure that no one knew where he had put it. He went to the kitchen and the box hadn't moved position, but he opened it up and the thimble was disappearing. In his mind, he keeps thinking there's more than one of these thimbles that keeps popping up. That's why he keeps going to check it. It's that reassuring his own mind that he's not going crazy. This thimble had just popped up in the house again, and no one this time could have known where he had put that box. So he was even more confused about it than before. During the rest of the year, not many other strange events happen. It gets to Christmas 1982. They're gearing up for Christmas. They've got all the decorations up and everything. They'll go to bed. And again, Steve smells smoke. He gets up, and this time he can't find any smoke in that house at all. He can't find no fire or anything. But he says the smell is putrid. It smells like something horrible that is burning. He goes, not a chemical smell, it just has a putrid burning smell. He's walking around the house. He can't find anything. He goes outside. The smell isn't outside, it is only in the house. He goes through all the cupboards, he goes through all the electrics to make sure nothing is smouldering, but he can't find nothing at all. Remaining a little bit nervous, he does go back to bed. They wake up in the morning to find in their living room, on the back wall, being covered in black soot. They can't find anything that caused that black soot in that house. Now, they did have a chimney stack, but that chimney stack had been blocked up, so there's no way any of that soot could come out. So they're really confused by this. Stephen goes to clean down the walls. As he's cleaning down the walls, he has to move the cabinet. As he moves that cabinet, he sees the thimble on the floor by the skirting board. That black soot seems to come up from where that thimble was sitting. Stephen's like, I'm not going to tell June about this. She's only just started to calm down and we're just going to put this down to something weird. He is really shocked by this now. And he starts thinking that maybe he needs to get someone to look at this sewing box. He takes her around to a friend's house who is a bit of a collector of weird stuff. And their friend's looking at it and he's going, I think that's human bone. I think that thimble is made from human bone. He goes, I've seen it before with ivory and all this sort of stuff. He goes, that looks like a human bone. You already know that's human teeth around that box. And he goes, that is a human bone, a burnt human bone. Now, Steve is like really now nervous about what he holds. His friends advise him that he needs to get a better opinion. Steve takes that on board, but a few more months go past and it's eating away at him. And we're now in 1983. So finally, Steve goes, actually, yeah, I'm going to go and get someone to properly look at this sewing box. Who better to look at it than Antiques Roadshow, BBC Antiques Roadshow. He looks down where they're about to film and he thinks, right, I'm going to go there and get them to appraise this sewing box and see what they make of it. Steve finds out where they're filming and he sets off, drives there, and it's a stately home somewhere, and not like what you see in the TV show. He gets there and there's this great big long line of people having their items looked at to see if they're worth being sent through to the next people, and then after that to go to the proper TV part and have a celebrity look at your goods. So it's like you have to have it all checked before you can get there. They only select certain good ones that they think are going to make good TV. So some staff come along and they're going along the line looking at people's items, going, no, thank you for bringing it along, but sorry, no, off your trot, sort of thing. They get to Steve and they look at it and he says that he knows these are real human teeth. He has a curiosity thing about it that sort of moves him on to the next stage, and he goes over to a table where there's slightly better experts to analyse it before they take it to the next level where you'd actually go on camera and be filmed. They're sitting there and they're looking at it and they are convinced that this thimble is made from human bone. One of the blokes turns around and says that he believes this is a human hip bone, that this has been carved from a human hip. And everyone is taken aback by this, and they're looking at the box and they're saying it's probably about 17th century, so it's got a lot of history to it. The brass, the way it all been done, but the teeth have probably been added later on, and that it may have had something else stuck around it and they've just used it to put these teeth around it. Again, this is where I get the information from, that it wasn't unusual for people to collect families' teeth. It just sounds gross. Saying that, I'm sitting here and right in front of me, I know there's a pot that's got all my kids' teeth in it when they started losing their teeth. So I shouldn't knock it too much, should I? But I'm not going to make an ornament and stick it on there. That's the point. So I might do. I might have a good Christmas present for them, wouldn't it? Here's your teeth back. Happy Christmas. But they don't think it's worth going onto the TV because it's got a ick factor. It's people are going to be put off. Sunday afternoon, sitting there, you're watching TV, eating your salad and all that, like Sunday lunch, and someone comes on there with a box made of human teeth and a thimble made from a human hip bone. So it doesn't make it onto the TV thing, which is a little bit disappointing about, but he's got some good information. He's about to leave when one of the people from the TV show comes up to him and goes, because one of the presenters wants to have a look at it. So he's like, yeah, fine. So this isn't on camera. Hugh Scully comes up and Hugh Scully is looking at this box and he's totally intrigued by it, and he thinks it's one of the most bizarrest things he's ever seen. Not only it's got these human teeth around it, but the thought that this thimble has been carved from a human bone. He advises Steve that really he needs to take it to a museum to be checked out and looked at. And Steve's like, well, what happens if it is a human bone? He goes, is that illegal? And they're like, Well, the producers are like, well, there may be some laws around that. So like having things made from humans is probably a little bit illegal. But Steve's a little bit starstruck seeing Hugh Scully and all that. But he goes back, but he takes her advice. He takes it to the museum. I believe that someone says that it's Norwich Museum. So he drives up to Norwich Museum and they confirm that this is a human bone, which is rather creepy when you think about it. Steve says like, well, what do I do about it? The advice from the museum was just don't say anything. Just take it away and never know about anything else. No one needs to know about it. So they're not too sure what to do themselves. Again, they're quite impressed by the item. They think it may be something local to do with Norwich area, going by some of the designs on the box, but it turns out that isn't the case. But it is around Suffolk. That ties it back into Specs Hall Manor. And it is believed that this item did come from that manor house years ago, and it was taken by the Nan or the Great Aunt. So Steve puts his investigator's hat on and heads down to Halsworth. And he's going around the town, and it's quite a small town, and the hall, the manor house, is set right back off the road, and he can't get into it to speak to anyone. But he walks along and he meets some people in the local village, and he gets talking to them, and he says about this box. He shows them the box and they're freaked out by it, and he tells them that he believes that his nan or his great aunt had been taking stuff out the manor house from about 1920. And like, well, it's probably worth quite a lot of money, and perhaps you should mention it to the manor house. He don't really want to do that because it's probably sold something by then. Only, come on, let's be truthful. But yeah, he wants to know the history of the hall and where this box could have come from. Then he bumps into someone that gives him a little bit of local folklore, and that ties in a possibility of what this could all be about. So in 1850, a maid is working at the manor house, and she's a very young maid. The people in that manor house are looking after her really well. She falls in love with a stable hand. This stable hand isn't really liked by the people in the manor. They frown upon that relationship, and for years they keep it low down, but they know that it's not approved of, so they don't make a big thing about it. The people in the manor house are now at the situation with that are now in the situation, if we don't see it, we don't know about it, and it's been left like that. Then it comes to a point where the maid has grown up a little bit and decides that she's going to marry this stable hand. Knowing that, the manor owns some properties around the area, and they take on a house just outside the land of the manor. They've got the blessing of the manor, but the manor are still concerned for their maid. It is believed that the stable hand is quite an abusive person. Over the next few years, the maid's persona changes to someone that's very fun-loving, to somebody that's very withdrawn and should turn up with a lot of bruises on them. There's an occasion with the gardener where he went down and actually took on the stable hand and beat him up, accusing him of hurting the maid. But this was her husband, and she defended him. But over the next few years, it seemed that things were getting worse and worse. Then, one night, the house burns down. The maid would normally be in that house at the time, was walking down the road away from that fire, and her husband was in that building and burnt to death. Now, the description of her husband as a stable hand was that he used to wear a tall floppy hat, a long cloak and a leather apron. The same description of what is seen in that garden. Knowing that, there was a rumour at the time that obviously the maid was suspected of starting this fire, that she actually got a part of his body and kept it and turned it into a thimble. And the idea was that she carved the hip joint into a thimble so that for the rest of her life, when she's sewing and she jabbed the pin or the needle into the thimble, she could still torment him in the afterlife. What a cruel woman. But you know what? If he abused her all his life, perhaps he deserved that. It does seem that there's a possibility that this thimble was the cause of all this stuff happening in their house, and that this gentleman was there to follow the thimble, a part of his body, the hip bone, and that it was that was attracted him to that house. And for some reason he was channeling himself through June, who didn't have no resemblance to the maid, so it's nothing like that at all, but obviously he wanted his thimble, his hip back. What if he walked wonky as a ghost without his hip? All jokes aside, that box ended up at a museum. No one knows what museum Stephen took this box to donate it, but somewhere in this country is a box made of teeth that's got a sewing kit in it that has a black thimble in it that is made from human bone. I think it's a very strange story. It's been pieced together from all different bits of information. There was a full report made out into the local Suffolk newspaper about 15 years ago. I can't find that. I know that the family went on to live a very happy life in that house till they sold it and moved to a different area. Nothing to do with what went on. They just moved on. No, the kids moved out and they retired somewhere else. So again, it's got a happy ending, and I'm sure the dog had a lovely happy life. Not so much as the crows did. But again, I hope you like this story. These are the sort of ones that do intrigue me, because it does involve a lot of jigsaw putting together and finding old reports and old microfilms. And it's quite disappointing now that I go to a museum that's in a local area and they don't have their microfilms anymore, because they've all sent them off to be digitally scanned and put online, but they don't get the original films back. I like using the microfilm machine and reading it up on the screen, or the old photograph to the newspaper. But you know, eventually all this stuff will be scanned and online, and it'll become a lot more easier to research. Okay, so thank you for watching this video. I hope you make it to the end. I've got some other ones I'm working on at the moment, and I'm going to try and do the Whitehall one and the pub one. As I said before in the live stream, I've reached out to a lot of the local pubs down there. Some of them are on board, some of them don't want to know, so we'll see how that works out. But I've got some London videos coming up that I'm going off to film soon, so I hope you're going to enjoy them. If you like this, give it a like, give it a subscribe, and again you can do the buy me a coffee and super thanks and all that. Thank you so much for all your support, and I'll see you in the next video soon. Bye.